If you'd like to skip to a topic, please use the timestamps in the description. The Drug Classroom is exclusively funded by donations. If you'd like to support, please visit patreon.com/thedrugclassroom. I've been hearing research into microdosing on LSD. What are the pros and cons of it? Potential safety? How do you ensure you're taking the right dose in an unregulated market? If it can cause hallucinations, and if so, to what degree? And what age recommendations does this come with? And if it can't cause hallucinations, is it safe to drive or not? I'll be discussing microdosing in a more complete way at some point. For those who don't know, microdosing is taking a psychedelic, often LSD, at a dose that's too low to notice any core psychedelic effects. This means around 10 micrograms of LSD. It is claimed to have cognitive, mood, and productivity benefits, while lacking sensory and psychedelic thought distortions. Because there's a lack of formal research, we really don't know what's going on. The alleged pros are memory enhancement, improved concentration, mood enhancement, greater self-control, increased energy, and simply having a happy day. Some of the negatives may be emotional dysregulation, feeling uneasy, and greater anxiety. Some users report a general mood amplifier effect, so a negative mood could be increased. It may be even more common to feel strange or anxious if you use more than what's considered a true microdose. Most of the potential safety issues are psychological, though there have been concerns about cardiac issues in the long term. We don't know if the cardiac issues are legitimate, but I think the risk is fairly low with about 2 uses per week. As you said, it's a black market. This makes dosing more difficult. Utilizing well-reviewed vendors on darknet markets is one option for potentially having a better source of LSD than what you'd get elsewhere. A drug like 1P LSD could also be easier to dose correctly, but it has yet to be researched. When you first try microdosing, I recommend doing so in a controlled environment so that you know how it affects you. Initially using it in a school or work setting might not be a great idea. It's best avoided until you're at least 18 years old. A microdose should not cause any hallucinations. If it does, the amount should be lowered. Since this is an untested area, even when you have absolutely no hallucinations, I would recommend against driving. Which nootropics have you tested? Are the legal, non-prescription ones worth looking into? To answer this, I'm going to treat nootropic as referring to cognitive enhancers in general. I'm not heavily into testing nootropics right now, though I have used some. Among those I've used are phenylpiracetam, N-acetylcimax, salbutamine, oxiracetam, caffeine, theanine, modafinil, bacopa, tyrosine, and alpha-brain. I generally recommend against using products like alpha-brain, as it's often better to use individual components. I've never made an effort to really track my performance to see if there's an impact. Those that seem to have a clear effect are caffeine, theanine, modafinil, oxiracetam, and possibly N-acetylcimax. The placebo factor is significant in this area, and I think it plagues nootropic experimentation. Right now, my supplementation is partly focused on cognitive enhancers, though I'm more focused on background supplements, which have mechanisms I think could be beneficial without an obvious acute change. If you have money to spend, perhaps it's worth checking out some nootropics, but keep your expectations reasonable. You should stick with common doses and focus on trying the less experimental ones first. Some of those are discussed in the nootropic subreddit in the beginner's guide. Keep in mind, a lot of the substances that are mentioned could be placebo or barely superior to placebo. Why haven't you made a video on cannabis yet? There are a few primary reasons. First, the research is going to take a long time. I'm currently working on some MDMA videos, and even though that's a smaller topic, I have around 270 papers to read. Not only will there be more for cannabis, I'd feel more comfortable doing it once I've read some of the available books. Second, I have to use my time wisely since the drug classroom is not fully supported and I can't do as much as I'd like to right now. Third, cannabis happens to be a drug where if people use it without researching and understanding the substance, they still have a fairly low risk of running into trouble. Plus, there are many sources of info already available, so it will be covered, but it might be a little while. Xanax and all them pharmaceuticals steal people's minds. I like how all pharmaceuticals was tossed into the comment as if infliximab and amoxicillin are stealing people's minds. Of course, people have all sorts of unjustifiable beliefs about vaccines and other topics, so it's not terribly surprising. This kind of chemophobia is unfortunately widespread. A lot of people really believe everything originating in a pharmaceutical lab is dangerous and ineffective. Even if we were to limit this statement to psychoactive drugs, it still isn't supported. Pharmaceuticals may alter your mood, change your sleep habits, and do many other things, but stealing minds is not part of it. Even though there can be very serious negative effects from these drugs, and pharmaceutical companies aren't always trustworthy, psychopharmaceuticals are not in the market because of a grand mind control conspiracy. I have 2 Concerta pills, but I don't have ADHD. Is it safe for me to take them? Am I going to get addicted or have long-term effects? By the way, I sometimes feel depressed. If you're otherwise healthy, it's physically safe to try methylphenidate, though that wouldn't be a good starting dose. You should not use both pills, and ideally you'd start lower than one. As for addiction, that's always a tricky question. If you're just experimenting, are otherwise mostly fulfilled, and have some reasonable level of self-control, you'll probably be fine. Addiction is highly dependent on the user rather than the drug, so a lot of factors come into play. As for depression, simply feeling depressed on occasion is not necessarily an issue, but if it's constant or recurrent and affecting your life, it's worth visiting a psychologist. If you have diagnosable depression, experimenting with drugs is generally worth avoiding.